What is going on there, Reject Nation? Greg here today to talk about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Specifically, I wanted to jump in on the conversation about mutants. A lot of people are speculating that mutants will finally be introduced through this movie, and I have a theory that may sound a little far-fetched at first, but if you stick with me on this journey, you'll see where I'm coming from. Hopefully. So if you guys could go ahead and hit that like button, I'd very much appreciate it. And let's just dive right into this. So before even the Fox merger even happened, the big question has been, when will mutants come into the MCU? There's been a lot of popular theories floating about. One theory being Thanos' snap created mutations in human genes. Another popular theory is that the Eternals already set up mutants because in the comics, the genetic experiments that the Celestials performed created the X gene. And another popular theory I was hearing going about was that the dreaming Celestial at the end of the movie, the energy emitted from that Celestial kickstarted the mutant gene. Now, after Eternals, we still haven't heard anything about mutants. What has been like the common theory for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness? Mutants will be introduced via the multiverse, and then through a series of cataclysmic events, it will result in presumably Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, essentially rewriting parts of the MCU timeline in which mutants do exist, presumably the Fox X-Men universe, opening the door for essentially a multiversal rewrite or reset, allowing the birth of mutants to exist within the main universe. So in short, it would be a reversal from what happens in the House of M comics. You might have heard this comic brought up a lot. In that comic, Scarlet Witch is the main threat, and in the end of the story, she blames mutants for the world's problems. Using her reality bending abilities, she declares the famous words, "No more mutants." So the common theory is that this movie would end essentially in a reversal of that with like a let there be mutants, which sounds cool. That sounds fine. But my theory is this: what if the MCU timeline we've been watching for the last 13 years, no more mutants, has already happened? Like I said, I know this sounds like a bit of a reach. However, I think this would answer some questions we've had about the MCU. Questions specifically regarding the events of Wandavision. I think it would better help reintroduce X-Men and mutants into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And with this phase after Wandavision, Loki, even the trailer for Moon Knight, this is called Multiverse of Madness. This is the mind-bending phase of the MCU. What more of a mind-bender would it be than to reveal to us that mutants were already there and that the actions of the Scarlet Witch erasing the existence of mutants already happened? Dive into this with me. Spider-Man No Way Home. That showed us it's possible to erase people from the world's memory, including Doctor Strange, via forgetting who Peter Parker was. Spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home. What if this movie takes it the next step further? Since WandaVision was announced, everyone has been looking to the House of M comic book as like the go-to source material to better understand and perhaps predict what might happen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, that's an important comic, but the comic that I'd recommend looking into is actually one of the follow-ups to House of M, X-Men Endangered Species. In that comic, after the existence of mutants has already been reduced from millions to only hundreds around the world, Hank McCoy, aka Beast, sets out on a journey to find a way to reverse the spell Wanda cast. And along this journey, he eventually meets up with Doctor Strange, who tells him exactly this: what she did completely changed reality, that it's nearly impossible to see where reality ends and her alteration of it begins. She casts her spell over billions of souls, over worlds and dimensions. Reality has been consumed by her spell. The magic is woven through everything, welded to all there is. So in the source material itself, Doctor Strange declares her spell affected worlds and dimensions, i.e. the multiverse. I tried rhyming that, it didn't quite work. So the main rumor, ever since this movie was announced at Comic-Con, is that Wanda Maximoff will be the main villain of this movie. And another rumor that's been circulating is that the Illuminati might be featured in this movie, and they would essentially act as protectors of the multiverse, who are here to stop multiversal threats. With this being a Doctor Strange movie, with the few appearances that we got of Scarlet Witch, and a movie about traveling the multiverse, why would Wanda Maximoff be considered the ultimate threat to the multiverse? Is it because the Illuminati believe in witchcraft lore? I don't think so. Maybe this is the real reason why Agatha Harkness, who once possessed the Darkhold, which grants access to the multiverse, told Wanda,
"You're supposed to be a myth.
So am I saying that we're in some repeated time loop where the Wanda we've been with the whole time has already done this? No, I'm not saying that. Loki has already introduced us to variants. So as we saw in the setup of that show, a variant of our protagonist was considered a multiversal threat. So what if in another universe, the events of Wanda Maximoff being brought to the breaking point of mutants already played out, and she declared no more mutants, affecting all the timelines, especially the one that we've been watching for the last 13 years. Spider-Man No Way Home showed us that just because variants exist does not mean they are running on exactly the same timeline. Case in point, Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, for sure his character is a lot older than Tom Holland's Peter Parker. This could be a similar thing with Wanda Maximoff, just in another universe. With the powers the Scarlet Witch possesses, her ability to warp reality, combine that with the ending events of Loki, where all the timelines were starting to intersect and began crossing paths, just went into chaos. That could explain why some things in WandaVision registered to her as familiarity, which were brand new to us, even to her. For example, the WandaVision series will lead us to believe that Tommy and Billy were just something she imagined up, that she gave birth to, and in like a week went from babies into these preteens, and for some reason stopped growing at that specific age. Yet, when she's using the Darkhold at the end of WandaVision, accessing the multiverse, she hears Tommy and Billy crying out for her. Essentially, the show's way of telling us these children are not purely imagination, but in fact, real children. Her mind could be connected to a variant of herself that already declared no more mutants in order to have a rewritten life so she could have the family she wanted. A line that stood out to us in that show was when she tells her children,
"Thanks for choosing me to be your mom."
Isn't it just a little bit odd that if she does traverse the multiverse, find Tommy and Billy, that they are indeed exactly like how she imagined in our universe? And even take Evan Peters showing up in WandaVision. As frustrating as it was to learn that he's just some guy called Ralph Boner, believe me, I didn't like that either, but I thought about it some more. When he shows up at their doorstep, she instantly recognizes him. Despite the fact that he looks and behaves totally different than Aaron Taylor Johnson, she recognizes he is indeed Pietro. We come to find out it's not, but Agatha needed someone that upon Wanda seeing would instantly recognize as her brother. Even though Wanda at one point questions, "Why do you look different?" she still recognizes him as her sibling. Maybe perhaps she's connected to a variant version of herself where her brother looks like Evan Peters, maybe the Fox universe. Here's where I'm coming from. To introduce mutants into the MCU, it's a major changeup and would drastically affect the timeline if they wanted to adhere to the source material. If it was like, mutants now exist, now we gotta like kind of do some of the prejudice allegories that comic draws. So like, even though the MCU does deviate from source material, the mutants have been around since practically like the beginning of time, and they grew to be more known to the world by the 20th century. And in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we've already had events like Avengers Endgame, where countless heroes, many with superpowers, super beings, came together to defeat a universe doom threat. A big part of bringing mutants to the big screen, like you just have to have this if you're going to bring mutants, is dealing with the hatred humans have against mutants, dealing with the racism allegories. Now in the MCU, after all these super beings have done for us and just how much they're celebrated, I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around the thought of humanity just suddenly singling out mutants specifically if they were to be introduced as brand new beings into the MCU timeline. Plain and simple, you just can't do mutants without the inclusion of the prejudices it presents. So maybe the way to handling it is restoring the mutants into the MCU, causing everyone to remember their animosity towards mutants before the legendary words of "I am Iron Man." Well, I just don't think it's that far-fetched of a plan. Any more so than like, let's just smash multiverses together and then create mutants. Kevin Feige, the man of many secrets, unusually unveiled a while ago the alternate post-credit scene for Iron Man. So this is like something kind of like out of the ordinary for the guy to do. And everything he says and does presents is so intentional. And in that post-credit scene, one thing that Nick Fury says is this:
"As if gamma accidents, radioactive bug bites, and assorted mutants weren't enough.
Why would Kevin Feige unveil their original plan to us? Maybe because he was hinting that mutants were already there? The original post-credit scene, which was actually scripted and filmed, indicated that there are mutants living amongst us in hiding. Some believe that perhaps the best way to introduce mutants would be they've been in hiding and now feel comfortable to come out. But mutants come in the form of millions, not just a few who are band together, like hiding like the Eternals. Sounds to me like that original post-credit scene would line up with the idea that there are currently only hundreds of mutants and not millions of mutants, just like House of M. Anyway, guys, that's just my little film theory for today. And that's just a theory. A film theory. But yeah, guys, what do you think? Tell me how ridiculous it sounds. Tell me if you think it sounds plausible at all. What's your theory of how mutants will come into the MCU? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Catch you guys soon.